How old was Mary when she had Jesus, and how do we know it? Most scholars agree she was probably about 12 or 13, and there are two reasons for this. The first reason is because that was pretty typical for the culture. Now, that doesn't mean she couldn't have been older. There were older women who were still virgins and who got married. That was pretty common. But it was not uncommon at all for a 12 or 13-year-old to get married or to be betrothed. And this was not a controversial issue. So if we're just going by customary norms, there's nothing wrong with suggesting she was married off, much like other girls her age. But the more convincing evidence number two, is the Proto-Evangelium of James. The Proto-Evangelium of James, or the Gospel of James, or the Infancy Gospel of James, is one of the most well-attested extra-biblical documents in all of the early church. It was the document that explained how Mary became betrothed to Joseph and how old she was, and it explains how she was a perpetual virgin. Now, in the text, Mary is serving at the temple, and Joseph is sort of selected magically by God to be in a marriage with Mary. And even Joseph is a little bit taken aback after he's selected. Initially, he says Joseph refused, saying, "I have children, and I am an old man, and she is a young girl." And of course, this explains why Joseph had brothers, yet Mary was still a virgin. Now, the age of 12 is somewhat significant in this gospel. It says, when she was 12 years old, there was held a council of priests, saying, "Behold, Mary has reached the age of 12 years in the temple of the Lord. What then shall we do with her, lest perchance she defile the sanctuary of the Lord?" So what's going to happen around age 12 or 13? She's going to hit puberty, and then being that she lives in the temple of the Lord, she has been dedicated to the service of the temple, she's going to start her menstruation cycle. And this perhaps could defile the temple of the Lord. So like, hey, we got to marry her off. We got to get her out of here. So what do? So it says, they said to the high priest, "You stand by the altar of the Lord, go in and pray concerning her, and whatever the Lord shall manifest unto you, that also we will do." And so the high priest does it. They go in, and it says, "And to whomever the Lord shall show a sign, his wife she shall be." And the heralds went out through all the circuit of Judea, and the trumpet of the Lord sounded, and all ran. Okay, so the sign, as we already previously discussed, befell on Joseph. And so this is where we get this idea that Mary was 12 years old when she was betrothed, and probably about 13 when she had Jesus. And now I know there's a bunch of people yelling at the phone, "Yes, but that's not in the Bible." I know it's not in the Bible, but again, this is not a contested document in the early church. In fact, it's directly quoted by Origen. Origen lived 185 to 253, somewhere in there. So it had to have been in circulation before Origen. It was also directly quoted by Clement, 150 to 215. So again, it had to have been widely circulated before the 2nd century. But even if you just want to throw out the proto-evangelism of James, we're still left with something very easy to reconcile with, which is that the early church fathers thought it was perfectly okay for a 12-year-old to get married. It was in one of their foundational documents. They found it not only acceptable, but a sign from God that a 12-year-old would get married and have children.